I don't think traditional rank trackings is viable anymore because it doesn't paint a complete picture.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the HighLevel Spotlight Sessions, where we showcase awesome marketers doing awesome marketing. Today, I'm joined by Mark Luckenbaugh. He's the co-founder of Local Viking. He just got me with a really good joke before we started recording. Mark, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. Hello.
Mark, I'm pumped to have you on. I think Local Viking is a very, obviously, I've heard a lot about it. It's very well known in our community. But I'm excited to hear your backstory. Did you ever have an agency of your own? How did you come to create this software?
Yeah, I have a small portfolio of agencies. Got into the agency space about a decade ago, and agency is one of my favorite models. I've dabbled. I mean, SaaS is also, it quickly stole my heart, but I still to this day invest in agencies, and I'm
Well, that's
very
interesting. And I want to come back to that. But
cool.
when you
Yeah,
got like 10 years ago, were you doing SEO? What kind of marketing were you
that,
doing?
that's where I started out. Yeah, I was in a different business. I owned my own business and offline, arena, and I was paying marketing companies SEO companies and PPC and whatnot. We were paying them like, 5 to 7 thousand a month. And I mean, this was a decade ago where that was, it's a little bit more commonplace now for an SEO ticket to be
Mm-hmm.
up there. But back then, I mean, it was a pretty big deal. And we were just seeing minimal to no returns. I mean, there was months where zero calls and we're like 6,000 out of pocket. And I wish I could say I was this savvy businessman that was doing 20 million a year, and it didn't matter. I mean, it wasn't. It mattered. I needed that to convert into some type of ROI. So I always told myself, I was like, man, if this oh, sorry, by the way, if you hear my kids, I'm still in a home office and I
Same over
have
here.
three
No
kids.
worries.
Okay, cool. So apologies for that. I did try to prevent it as much as possible. But anywho, I was like, man, if I ever have the opportunity, I'm going to learn how to do this. And, I think there's a space for this is with me knowing nothing about the industry, but I'm like, man, there's going to be a space for business owners to pay for results. And
Mm.
I got my opportunity not long after that. I had a really unfortunate circumstance happen. Actually, it was the most fortunate thing ever. At the time, it wasn't, as
Hmm.
it kind of hemorrhaged my business a bit, and I ended up. I'm like, you know what? Now's the time, and I started taking over a lot of the marketing stuff for the other business anyway, and I was like, man, I'm gonna do it. And the funniest part of the story, because that's not really that cool of a story. The funniest part is the first like way I made a bunch of money. Well, bunch of money subjective, but how I started making money with it was I played an app, like a video game, right?
Okay.
And we had everyone first off took the app way too seriously, which happens to most like hardcore gamer type people, and
Okay.
I fell victim to it. So there was a secondary communication app to plan like strategy. So I don't know if I ever told anyone this, like in this type of an ecosystem, by the way. It's like a really funny, dorky story. But I ended up becoming friends with the one guy, and he was always posting pictures with like NFL stars, and like he looked like he had like a real baller lifestyle. And we became friends, and he was going through a transition as well where he just sold a restaurant and wanted to like go back to college. He had like a high-end Italian restaurant in Seattle. And I was like, man. And I started learning about, and I was learning, I was getting hands on, started playing with ranking my own stuff. And I was very new, I was very green. And I was like, man, you have an impressive Rolodex. I was like, look, you team up and get me the meetings. We can rank these guys' site. Now, this is a decade ago, man. We were ranking with such shit tactics
Sure.
and just terrible methods that were working so beautifully well. And I mean, we weren't even getting access to websites back then. Like my pitch went in, and my pitch was like, we'll rank you before you pay. Like I'll put you on page one before you even pay, and if you want to stay there. And of
Right.
course, we owned the link sources, which at the time
Hmm.
were I was arbitraging links. It was really new, right? I was learning, And we went in and made it happen. And through that connection, we ended up hooking up with a dental marketing consultant.
Okay.
And we became allies instead of enemies. It's always, you can always go two ways with that. And I always encourage people, always be allies with that guy, with that other person, right? And they ended up having a huge book of clients. They do really well even now. They expanded into technology in that specific space, and that story people have heard a million times. We don't have to rehash it, but I basically made some really good referral connections through just being able to provide results, and we went to the moon, man. We went to the moon.
And so at what point, when did Local Viking come out of that?
Local Viking, we started messing with that in like 2017. There's some things Google does really well, and there's some things that when you're an agency could be improved just in terms of like management, being able to see your KPIs in one place. I mean, at the time there was like the GMB posting was really hot, and you couldn't really schedule that whatsoever. Actually, I don't think you still can in the GMB app, and it was more of a thing we just needed for ourselves. We had, we have a bunch of clients, and it was just becoming really rough to manage.
Do you
All
still
of the
see
reporting
that
stuff.
that data? So I'm curious about that. Google posting was something I remember overlooking when I was running an agency, and I was just like, does anyone really care? Like, this is, or why are we even talking about this? And then I remember,
Sure.
like, in my closer to when I left the agency to jump on board with HighLevel, I remember it being more and more part of the conversation as like, hey, this is actually moving the needle. Like, we're seeing data that shows if we consistently post to the client's Google My Business that it is improving things. Is that still the case? Do you still see that?
So yeah, it seems as though a lot of things that used to be over the past couple of years have taken a bit of a nerf. Um, Having said that, yeah, here's the thing. If you would ask me that about most things, Q&As, for example, in Google, don't live or die by it. However, we see that, oh man, I wish I'm so comfortable sharing the specifics of this query, and I'm not going to, just because it's really racy, like it's inappropriate, and it's weird that we found it. It became like an internal joke at LV, but it's a specific local search that produces a map pack for a completely inappropriate topic. I swear I'm not even going to release the query, but it was all ranking based on Q&A data, and it was where to find a specific thing, which is just really messed up. So you can find pieces of data like when there's zero competition, which is where I like to do single variable tests as well, because like the idea is never to find the silver bullet. Like I hate the idea of a silver bullet in SEO. There's so many little things, and whether it's GMB or not, like we know on page and links are still king, right? In GMB, the case of like the authority of the page that's linked to your GMB and the site and whatnot. Like there's these authority factors. Everything else is like, I use the analogy of like dumping water in a cup. Everyone's looking for that one thing when they take the picture and dump it in, it just overflows. You rank for everything all of the time. You're just the gram puba and the SERPs, and sounds good. And sometimes you can find that. Sometimes links and on page are still the key. Sometimes just on page is still the key. It's going to be based on the SERP. It's going to be based on the competition in the SERP, right? The size of the market, how many other people are gunning for, rankings for that specific query. So like, is it a signal? Sure. And there's still to this day going to be single variable tests to prove that. That brings me, there's a huge, it became like an unhealthy argument, which most SEO arguments become just unhealthy and pointless.
Pretty quickly, right? They devolve pretty rapidly.
and we get hit up a lot where people challenge us on like EXIF data and images. And I hate it because like I don't want to die on the hill of EXIF data. But we have so we can prove that Google reads the EXIF data, and we prove that by taking images, bulk uploading images all on the same day, And the only thing that differentiated the dates were the dates that we injected into the EXIF data. And then you could see in the GMB itself, it categorized all of the photos by the dates from the EXIF data, not the date it was uploaded. So indubitably, freaking case closed. They read it. Now, am I going to die on the hill of saying, if you don't have EXIF data, you're not going to rank? No, absolutely not. I don't think I've ever died on that hill. And if anyone dies on that hill, they probably have an EXIF data tool to sell you. Now, we have EXIF data inside of our tool. If you want to use it, please use it. Please don't manipulate it, right? Like, don't use our tool for manipulation. Like, and honestly, I don't think there's much manipulation possible anymore with it. Like, Google's not like.
So that's really interesting.
Go ahead.
Let me run with that a little bit.
Sure.
In my mind, it's always been a no-brainer that if the company that controls the SERPs gives you things that you can fill out, it's probably a good idea to fill them out.
Sure.
Right? So
absolutely. So here's a spin on that, and I have a interesting story I can share there as well.
Please do.
This is valuable. This is pretty valuable, by the way. I'm of the belief, now this is where we're in speculation land, because I'm obviously not a Google engineer. I mean, that obviously, like, I'm probably at least like 30, 40 IQ points below where I can get a job engineering at Google. But anywho, like, we know there's ways we can deliver data to Google. So like schema, for example, is a way, not just to Google in general, but I like to look over time as Google then like deprecates things and why they do that. So like, same as schema, Google's not really into it, right? They deprecated it, and it's not really as big of a thing. Well, because it's deprecated. Now, why would they do that? And it's like, well, I mean, we already spent how many years giving Google information and linking properties together semantically for them, saying, hey, this is the same as this. Now, there's like, the only way I can imagine, again, speculation, I could be way off base here, and I can eat crow and look like the class clown, and I'm fine with that. But I think it's an important conversation because I'm seeing it in GMB as well, which I'll explain. But, you know, why would Google, once they're good, like, listen, man, Google's pretty good. Like, there's still weaknesses, but they're really impressive what they do with the amount of data they parse and store and understand. Like, extremely impressive company. So do they want someone like you or I being able to tell them how properties are semantically related? Like, yeah, until they train their AI to do it better than we could, or maybe not better, but they're going to have a higher confidence that their AI isn't intentionally trying to manipulate.
Of course. As soon as you give us the power, we start manipulating it.
Yeah. So we had at Local Viking, which I'm glad to talk about, because I don't ever like there to be any misconstrued, information or rumors out there. But Google audited our API usage, like, at a granular level. And they did a few other companies from what I've heard. I have no idea. Like this is like, I've no reason to disbelieve that they did other companies. And Google did tell us via email correspondence that they were doing more companies. So if you're doing anything with the GMB API, I hope you're doing shit right. I hope you're not knowingly allowing people to spam through there, because it's not going to be great. But so what they got upset with us about, and I guess to give a 10-second backstory, you used to be able to take high-powered local guide accounts and very easily, I mean, you could add businesses and you could try to verify GMBs using these accounts. You could a black hat way they were being used. Well, I guess that's all a little black hat, isn't it? But I'd say a more dangerous way they were being used is people would create a collection of these guide accounts. They'd go in and say you're trying to outrank a personal injury lawyer in the 3-pack. You'd go in and suggest a change to their category. And you'd say they're not a personal injury lawyer, they're a florist. and you're, because of the authority of your account, your guide accounts and all of the recommendations, it was, whatever algorithm they looked at the time to determine if that was a true edit or not, they'd change your category and you drop out of the 3-pack.
So this is like anti-SEO.
Oh, it's complete negative SEO. Like, so we started to see, like, we still see the edits come in, right? Like, just in our clients, like outside of LV, just in agencies, we see these edits come in, and everyone's always scared of like doing changes, whether it's through the API, the dashboard. Like, GMB is a very volatile.
If you're ranking, do not change anything.
Yeah, and I mean, there's like, you can get just like false positive suspensions where something triggers in their system and your listing suspends. And it's a good listing. It's a real business, real location, right? Everything's legit. It's just it's a trust factor. It's like, it's an algorithm, and for whatever reason, it triggers an auto suspend. So there's people that use like these third-party accounts to change the edits back. We started to see that they're not working much anymore. And I told before the GMB audit of our API our GMB API audit, I was telling we were on an SEO call in one of my agencies, and I told everyone, I was like, look, we're on borrowed time with how these guide accounts are going to work. Like, don't worry about them much anymore, because I don't think Google is going to continue to allow people to go in and just determine the taxonomy of businesses in their platform. Like, I'm telling you, they allowed it for a time because they were collecting data. They were trying to let people show you what a real business looks like. Anything marked as spam, it went through. They processed it. They try to identify it with ML now, right? Being able to programmatically determine if something's spam. So what we created in Local Viking was a reversion technology. So, and it was all through the API. So if like these bad actors went and changed your attribute data on your GMB, we would detect that through the API, and we would take the data you had saved in our system, and we'd force revert the change back to what you wanted it to be through the Google API. Well, Google got pissed at us. They told us straight up, they're like, we're changing this stuff. Take a second, we're changing. So it wasn't even bad actors anymore. Google, like, a lot of times when people are like, man, we're getting all these edits, like, so many of those edits aren't really guide account. Like, there's a lot more of them are Google now than anything. So Google was getting,
so by they were getting, our AI is changing this.
Correct. And Google got frustrated because we were essentially using their API to revert what they thought was right. Like, they thought we were doing something manipulative potentially. So we disabled that, and we're like, no, here was the intention. And it kind of became, something we all laughed off, but it almost was not a laughing matter, because they thought there was something nefarious there. But there's an example of just like, when Google sees that something's being abused, whether it's EXIF data, posting, guide accounts, schema, not necessarily the schema was abused. I mean, some people did like overstuff same as to try to create like the semantic circle of, whatever the flavor of the week SEO is they're doing, which is fine. I'm not going to bash it. I'm just, there was people that abused it. They're only going to allow so much of that before they're going to rely on their AI to determine what's important and what isn't. So yeah, I don't think any of those things, like, I mean, the edits through the API used to carry more weight. They used to be safer, and Google nerfed that. Like, they're not going to allow people. Again, they're pretty smart cookies over there. Like, you're not going to get one over on them consistently forever. They're going to start catching stuff like that.
So we can double back to some of the features of Local Viking, because I do think it's really cool, and we can talk about that. But while I have you in this sort of conversation, I'm fascinated. What are your thoughts just to the industry in general? Like, what do you see on the horizon? Okay, let me rephrase this. With what you see on the horizon of SEO, are you excited or are you disappointed?
That's a really good question.
What I assume you see is more AI making decisions based on what we just talked about.
Absolutely.
So is that a better world because now we're not dogfighting with other SEOs on, scammy tactics and trying to figure out the angle, and we're all just focusing on building better, helping our clients build better businesses? Or what? I don't know. What's your take?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, and we started shifting our strategy a couple of years ago. A lot of SEOs have now. I think because it's reliant on AI, right? And we know the entire conversation of rank brain, and we know Google's moving farther and farther toward, instead of having, maybe not instead of, but in addition to having these rules, these algorithmic rules, right? These parameters and their document scoring systems. And, I'm not sure how much of that changes and says, hey, let's just let this AI go crazy. Because I have a really, and this is funny when you see people talk about AI and marketing tools and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of have to laugh because, like, not to be like a pretentious prick, I don't laugh in that way. I'm just like, man, I don't know if these guys know what AI is really and how they're using this term. And this is something like Sean's a really smart dude. I feel like we'd vibe on that. When you come from the engineer world, that, like, so for example, we have a friend who actually used to work with us on our software portfolio. He's one of the lead guys for Amazon's AI. Wow. And he works up in New York now. Yeah, he bailed on us for big tech, which that's okay. Sorry, maybe in the next 20 years we can make him feel bad about that. For now, he's high on the hog, man. He's doing really well. But like, they just went and built an entire AI to do like predictive media serving for the Amazon Prime Video service.
Okay.
And this guy's like Rain Man engineers. They all are. These are the top PhD like computer scientists. Like, these are not the same type of people as most people. They're different. They're the 1%. Like, they completely bombed. They did not do well, and they scrapped it. And it's because, like, AI. So if those guys don't have a firm grasp on AI, like, maybe you could say, hey, we're still going to have the argument that the Google engineers are X% better. Cool. I'm not smart enough to have that argument. So cool, have it. But they still don't have a quite firm enough grasp. So when companies like that don't have it, I don't think we need to ever worry about, not in at least the next couple of years, a true AI-driven SERP. And even if we do, I think the strategy is then to go more from a, if something's driven by AI, that means the AI had to see a patternistic flow of data, right? And then you have to imagine all that's based on a taxonomy. So, and we see this now, like, what's going to work for all lawyers. So and then you can break it down by taxonomy. I use personal injury. I work with a lot of them. Every personal injury lawyer in the country now, like, that's probably how Google would look at it. Like, their AI is not going to look at every SMB because they're not going to gather. I don't think they're going to see enough patterns and gather enough good data from that. So you're going to start working in certain taxonomies, and you can use the GMB taxonomy. That's a great place to start because we're talking about GMB. But, like, so those in there, it's like, what type of content are they producing? What are their backlinks? So I think it just goes down to, like, how well can you reverse engineer what other
That's
people
super
are
interesting.
doing.
And so I have the smartest SEO that I know, and I haven't spoken with him about tactics in probably more than a year. But what was really eye-opening to me the last time I spoke with him was the idea that there's no universal set of things that you need to do that produces a top ranking, that it's all relative within the SERP. And so he was like, in one SERP, it may be true that if you want to rank this page, it needs way more words or way more whatevers or less of this and more of that. But it's only because the other top rankings in that SERP have or don't have those things.
I agree, yeah.
So that's kind of crazy, right? So I think that's counter to what most people think about SEO, is that, oh, there's this set of rules that only Google knows and we're slowly figuring them out, and you just go do those things and then you improve. For me, that was like a light bulb moment of like, wait, but doesn't this open the door then of, I'm doing this just because the top rankers in this SERP do this, but that's not actually the best thing for the user or in general or whatever. I thought that was fascinating. And is that what we're saying, that AI is basically looking within a SERP and then doing its thing as opposed to
Yeah.
looking across?
So let's unpackage. I'll tell you something I really like to do. And I forget where I learned to think like this, but it was something specifically, I don't know, probably some like goofy philosophy video or something about critical thinking. But if you start looking, so let's shift just a bit into like the core web vitals. And I'm not going to go on a tangent here. We'll keep it concise because I want it to directly correlate to what you just said, which I'm for the most part agree. I still think there's other signals that would push relevance. But I think if you were looking, like if you sent an AI in to reverse engineer a specific taxonomy, 100%, that's what you're going to find. Now, is there still these algorithmic rules and parameters that say, hey, if we do see links, even though these guys don't have them, are we still going to assign value? Yeah, of course. So, but I still agree with the premise of what he said. I think it's a rock solid foundation. Sounds like a smart guy. I mean,
he's very smart.
I mean, if I didn't agree with him, I wouldn't say he sounded smart. I'm kidding. No, but he definitely sounds like because it's literally how results based on AI are supposed to work, right? I mean, I'm not an AI expert by any means. I'm a fan of it. I could one day be a student of it, but an expert, no. But essentially, you're creating patterns of how to look at things so you can understand it, right? I mean, so that whole patternistic mindset. So if you look at what Google said about the core web vitals, because everyone's freaking out, everyone's like, hey, you know, my CLS.
What are core web vitals? That's the first time I've heard that term.
Oh, wow. Okay. So core web vitals are site performance metrics that Google said are going to be a ranking factor. Now there's argument about how much of a ranking factor it's going to be. And I don't think there's an absolute thing where it's like, hey, if you're deviating outside of the norm by this much, you're just gonna die. Like I think it has to be a large, right?
Sure.
Like they're not gonna look at like a standard deviation and kill everyone outside the tiniest cluster. They'd ruin their SERP. But I do think if the best performing sites are here, and then you have everyone else, and then like you're way out here. Well, I'm off the screen. Way out here is an outlier. You're probably like it's probably gonna have a more negative effect. Right? Does that make sense? Like
100%.
I'm trying to explain this in a non-mathematical way or sense. So because like statistics suck, like advanced statistics suck. But
there's a buffer.
For sure. And like if you're just right outside the line, the negative impact is going to be like nil. But it was the farther you go in an outlying position, you're gonna potentially get your head cut off because you're a shitty site. You're not performing well. So that's what they're looking at. So what they said was really valuable because this is how these engineers are thinking. And they said they're going to use averages. So they do that already with like Crux data and whatnot. Like everything's based on averages, and the site performance world's nauseatingly, it can get really weird and complex when you do like a cohort user by user model. But regardless, like they said, like, we're going to look at the average of the sites for your I forget the term. They used an ambiguous term, but like it's the sites in your taxonomic freaking bracket. Like they're going to use the sites that are competing for your query, and related sites. So they said, like, look, it's going to be based on an average, and and that's how a logical system would work. It's not going to be these hard rules, and they say, hey, if you're deviating just a bit, you're just going to be dead in the water. It's like it can't operate like that. Like a good engineer wouldn't use bad math principles in developing.
But at the same time, and again, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the Google engineers because, as we already established, they're very smart people. But simplistically thinking, it sets yourself up for a scenario where, okay, well, this SERP has been dominated by these entities for so long, but they're all kind of garbage. And so you're basically having to mimic garbage to work your way up within the scope of that SERP.
I can't imagine I can't imagine it would quite swing that way though, right?
Yeah.
Because we'd have to have the argument for still there still has to be some positive rules, which is why
Exactly.
another reason I don't think it'll ever be pure AI
It has to be,
until
yeah.
AI's way. So I'm sorry, that was the point, man. I'm not good at making. I should watch some
Don't
videos on
worry,
how to
we
make
got
a
back to
point.
it.
Yeah, articulate a point a little bit better. That's the reason, like, these big companies don't have a full grasp on AI. You're not going to see a full AI driven system. There has to still be these algorithmic rules, which have done well for them so far. So, like, until we see an AI that's going to be able to look at that and say, look, just because this is outside of the pattern, does it's not, that could be a great thing. This could mean this document we want to potentially index is much more valuable because it's going to provide a better experience, right? So
Yeah.
it's still going
Which
to have to
makes you think
operate as
surely
the cost.
they still test the outlier just to make sure that yeah, that is an outlier and not something that's actually an improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that would really line you up to be like manipulated. Like if we could say, okay, if it's just going to rely on patterns, we could just run the worst quality link generated
Yeah.
by software to every website in the taxonomy, and now that's the norm. So when
Yeah.
we do that, like Google's not gonna get played on that level, I don't think. So I think it'll do those rules first, and then they'll let the AI kind of, you know, learn and develop, find new patterns and stuff that they can squeeze in. But
For
I
sure.
don't know.
So let me double back to a more local Viking specific topic that I want to end with. I don't want to keep you forever, but one thing I think it's exciting in the SEO world that maybe a lot of agencies who aren't heavy into SEO haven't really thought about, or maybe they're not aware of, is that I feel like in the past few years, the local SERP has become so different than the broad SERP that it's really exponentially opened up the opportunities for an SEO. Because if you're a local business, you're now, I feel like the sort of the competitive landscape has changed, where you used to a lot of times just be totally dominated by big names and things like that, and it's like, oh, is it even worth trying? And now with the local situation, you have much more of a fighting chance. And so I think your mapping tool really illustrates this point, right? I don't know if a lot of people are aware of how different it does vary. And so I'm just going to share my screen real quick to give a better idea of what I'm talking about here. Local Viking has this feature where, well, Mark, you describe it. What am I looking at? What are all these circles?
Okay, so basically Google changed its like core ranking algorithm, or maybe not changed, but it started to become a lot heavily based on proximity. And that was more of a convenience factor. So it's going to know from a GPS perspective, if you and I were walking down the street and we Googled, like, hey, we want to grab some sushi, it's going to give us, based on our proximity, the fact we're walking, it's going to try to give us the most convenient results. So that was the reasoning for doing it. The problem that opened up for traditional rank tracking, and especially because a lot of people, when you're an SEO company, rank tracking is a pretty big KPI, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a core of your.
It's pretty much
we
all
always
your
try to,
clients can understand.
right, and that's what they're hiring. Hey, we want to be positioned better for dentists in this city or whatever, in whatever city. So this kind of adds a bit more life into it. I don't think traditional rank trackings is viable anymore because it doesn't paint a complete picture. It paints the picture of the local results in one single node. Once it takes the results from you standing on a very specific GPS coordinate and what that looks like from that coordinate. But then you can see that isn't, if you're standing in the number one spot, in that like upper left hand, like you could look like you're number one, and like, depending on how that's configured, that could be great. Maybe,
Yeah.
people aren't necessarily going to drive 40 minutes across LA to go perform a certain task or purchase a service or what have you. But in a lot of cases, more cases than not, it gives you the idea that, like, hey, what type of areas are we not performing well? And that's really where my future is going to go, at least in terms of this technology, is more of a business intelligence. You know,
Yeah,
what
that's a good
neighborhoods are
point.
we not ranking in? Why are we not ranking in these neighborhoods? Especially when you start to, I mean, even without additional tooling, if you just start to think, if you use your brain power and start layering additional data, just like most SMBs can do, the owners know the most affluent neighborhoods. They say, hey,
Mhm.
we did jobs in these neighborhoods, right? It's like a roofer. And 80% of the roofing systems are like these luxury, right? They're not the typical
Mhm.
30-year asphalt shingle. They're these luxury roofs. I mean, there's things that rank tracking doesn't tell you. Once you start laying rank tracking out on a grid like this, you can start to do that with a lot of things. You can start to think of your attribution and your, you know, where did our jobs come from and what's the average value of our jobs. You can start layering data. You know, once you're looking at real data, it's, to me, this is the difference, even though it's still 2D. It's like when a video game went from 2D to 3D, and you can
Yeah.
see the world a bit better. Like a rank tracking is like 1D. Like what is 1D? One dimensional, yeah. Like just looking at ones and twos and threes on a, you know, on a table. It's
Mhm.
1D. Like this is going from 8-bit to you know, the Sega CD here, baby. Like this is how you have to look at it, and you can start to, like I said, put additional layers of intelligence in and say like, wow, we're not doing well in these neighborhoods, or, you know, in whatever specific areas. And it's also a great way to kind of bundle up marketing services. Like LSA, I think, is going to change the game. We've been playing with a lot of LSA in our agencies. The leads are really cheap. Um,
LSA? What is, oh, is that Google's lead ad?
yeah, yeah. And some people did not have a good experience with it, and that's okay. We've had some great experience thus far. Um, you know,
I'm
having said that,
so
go
oblivious
ahead.
to that. Is that available to everybody yet?
I mean, yeah, like I mean, anyone can use it. It serves, I forget how many categories, but it's starting to get fairly robust. And they have the lead service ads for, you know, the service categories, and they have Google Guaranteed as well, which is like the whatever, like
Yeah.
the sister product for the other categories. Um, yeah, I mean, it's easy to set up. It's like I said, we've seen good results with it thus far. Um, we want to do more with that. Also, you know, being able to, which is potentially an evolution of LV or another tool at some point, being able to target areas specifically to increase ad spend based on having additional layers of business intelligence. Or, you
Mm.
know, I think we need to get away from the tables, the columns and tables for rank tracking for local. Like, you
Totally.
know,
Because the opposite could be true, right? I feel like there are circumstances where you run a rank tracker and it's showing that your client is ranking terribly because it's looking at like the city, and it's like, but you
true.
don't need to rank number one for the city. You're all the way over here in the suburb. Like you need a local result to show you the
Yeah.
true picture. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's another huge issue for sure, is just, you know, the accuracy of the reporting isn't always to find the deficit. It's sometimes like, hey, you're actually doing really well. We just had the,
Yeah.
like, this is just another reason we went in this direction, was we have this issue still to this day, even with this, even with having LV, where, you know, we were looking at, you know, visibility and whatnot, and in a different tool, and the visibility was terrible, and it
Mhm.
caused like an upset at the company and the agency, and everyone freaked out. And I went through, and it was like, yeah, it kind of gave everyone like a false negative though, because it
100%.
dropped because of these things. But like, look at the GMB and the 3 pack still, and the, you know, so it provides another layer, not to omit the bad. That's not necessarily the idea. It's to showcase the good. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of really good agencies out there that have trouble with reporting and articulating their value.
Mhm.
And the worst, that's another, again, coming from like any pain point of an agency, I've felt it through my own ignorance or just learning the hard way or what have you. Like it's rough. Like I love the agency model. I've debated it. I debate it again. I don't think anyone could argue against my agency argument. It's a beautiful model if done right. It's like
We
any real
agree.
business.
That's why
There's bumps.
we build and serve agencies, yeah, and not businesses.
I mean, yeah. I guess you're not going to be debating against me, but and that's the beauty with what you guys do as well, where there's so many services that traditionally were just out of reach for SMBs, and I mean, I know you guys have the you broke it all down on your sales page or your homepage or pricing page or maybe all of them or whatever, but how much it would cost to stack all of the tech, and then like for a business owner, an agency to be able to provide that to a business owner, and I mean follow up and
Yeah.
creating those systems. I mean, that's freaking gold, man, for any business, but especially to be able to provide that, where it's like, what were their options before? Like Infusionsoft, like okay, now you just eliminated 70% of just based on budget, and it's hard to use. Like Infusionsoft's rough. Like you just eliminated 70, 80, 90% of SMBs from accessing the tech. So you guys appreciate that too. But anything you can do to help an agency where I'm on board. I know you guys are too. That's why we resonated well together. But
well, so let me finish with this, because you mentioned it earlier that you invest in agencies, and I feel like it's really hard for a digital agency to exit, right? Unless you've built up a really strong recurring revenue model, it's hard to sell an agency. What do you look for? What are you doing? Talk me through this. What do you look for? What are you excited about? What makes you pull the trigger?
I look for agencies with strong sales systems, repeatable sales systems. I also won't buy an agency straight up. I don't know. Not trying to rain on anyone's parade. Not a good deal for me. We come and look to buy, depending on the agency, between 25 and 50%, and then all I need is someone that's going to rock the sales, and they're going to rock the client management. Now we have resources for that. I can help with, like, we have ways to help. We've been doing this a long time, but that's the biggest thing for me. Just because I don't want to go in and buy an entire agency. Far too many times. I don't care how many owners read Built to Sell. Great book, by the way. I mean, I'm not discounting the book. Everyone should read it, but you're still more attached to your clients than you're probably willing to admit. Most agency owners. It's not a bad thing, man. I know this didn't just become book club hour, but now I'm onto books, and you can see a little bit of my collection back there. Chet Holmes, man. He had a gross amount of the Fortune 500s on his client list. Rest in peace. Great freaking marketer. But he said, become your client's best friend. The complete antithesis of Built to Sell, and creating yourself outside of the business so you can sell it. Chet said, yeah, instead I'm going to have 60, 80 of the top Fortune 500s. It was something gross. It was unheard of, man. It was so special. But like, me personally, like, I don't want to buy the agency flat out. There's too many ifs, ands. I also saw my partner in LV, in the CTO, his dad bought an agency, actually off of someone well-known in the space. And some guys, some of their staff was from Eastern Europe, and they came in. It was a very shady deal. They came in with like the wife of the person they bought it from, this public figure that most people would know. I'm not going to drop his name. Don't want that drama. But they went in and like wiped out the client list and took a bunch of the clients back and sourced it through this company that was now in like somewhere in Eastern Europe. And so they're like, the legal recourse was zero. The guy's out several $1 million. His client list just got cut by 65, 80%, whatever it was. That's scary. I'd rather go in with someone who's like, hey, we built to, I look for at least, million, million and a half in revenue, recurring annual revenue. It has to be. That's on the lower end. I like to see 2 mil plus, but someone that says, look, here's the repeatable things we've been doing to gain clients. And then we'll come in, we usually structure a deal where, we do half cash down. We'll have them hold the loan for like 2 years. We'll pay it off out of disbursements. We bring tech, team, strategy, we bring scale. Here's how you brought on 20 clients last month. Cool. Let's mechanize this. Let's scale this. Let's see if we can bring on 30, 40, 50. So while I'm not
do
getting
they
on the
have
phone
to
and
be
selling,
doing SEO now?
No, absolutely not, man. One company, they actually might watch this. One company started off as a vendor that we're now headhunting viciously. We want them. They're not an SEO company at all, but we want to snatch them up. They can start offering SEO. We now have their skills to use in a couple of other agencies that lack what they're doing. So no, definitely not. But they will be by the time we get in there. We have a different process for SEO, which maybe we get on another time. I can lay out the stuff we're doing with frameworks and stuff. But I like SEO.
Idea.
Yeah, it's cool, but that's what I usually look for in an agency. I'd say anyone that wants to invest in agencies is probably a smart play. Just buying something outright is so dangerous. Then you start to get into murky water. It's like if someone wants to sell and they're kind of the face of the brand, you now are going to have to pull them on salaried for at least 2 years. Sometimes you say a year. You're going to have to pull them on for like 2 years. You're going to have to do a handoff process. It's always ugly. Most of your clients always can identify there's massive shifts happening. You start losing confidence. Like I don't want to work with people that are ready to cash out and quit. Not to say they're quitting. Like it's not a bad thing. Like sell your agency for sure if that's what you want to do. But to me, like I don't want to hand off. Like you quit on this for whatever reason. Maybe you just want to do something different. It's not necessarily a negative thing. But it's just not me. I'd rather work with someone that wants to grow and scale.
This is fascinating. We should definitely schedule another talk on this because I feel like there are lots of agencies that are growing and have become really successful, and then they're looking at their competitors like, should we just buy them out? But like, I don't like the idea of doing that. It sounds like you've got a more creative solution.
Yeah.
So do you have a process if somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh man, I'd love to get in touch with him about this? Do you have a landing page or somewhere, or is it just things that cross your radar?
Man, I'm going to tell you a really weird 30-second story. I'm so weird about handing out. So like, we've kind of like a process for this. It's just a lot of these deals happened in like masterminds that we've had. So we'll throw a small group thing. People come out. We actually did one in the little town I live close in, Gettysburg. That was interesting. It was fun, really fun. We did one in Baltimore. I did a big event in Vegas in 2017. Like a lot of the deals come out of that, where it's face to face, it's belly to belly. But like, we have a process. It's just, man, over the years I've acquired a few haters, man, and I try to keep a lot of my agency stuff completely separate from, any of the public software or groups or stuff that we have. So I don't know. I mean, I'm easy to find. I have a little group on Facebook that's free and fun. I'm on Facebook too often because of aforementioned group. So like I'm easy to find, and I could put someone through the process. But that sounds like 33-degree Mason stuff. Like it's like a secret fraternity. It's really not that. It's really not that cool. I try to be a little private with my agency portfolio because, man, there's just a couple lunatics will always just make you be a little secretive. And my agencies really are my core business. I mean, I'm a lot more diversified into SaaS now, and I love SaaS, and I have a lot of cool softwares coming. I mean, it looks like we might be working with you guys on a grid integration. Maybe I shouldn't have said that yet. I don't know. I imagine it's not a secret. If so, should Sean will yell at me about it. I'll have to retract that.
Let's just say that we'll definitely be having you guys back on soon. And we're about to hit the hour mark. I don't want to keep you too long, but localviking.com. If you guys are in the SEO game and you don't have a tool like this, I would strongly advise checking it out. They do the mapping like we just talked about, but they also do Google My Business Management at scale, Google My Business Posting at scale. And it sounds like they've got a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipeline as well.
Thanks, man. I
Did
guess
you want
the
to add
biggest
something?
thing,
I thought you were gonna. Did I miss a
if I
feature?
could,
Yeah, of
no,
course.
I mean, I'd love for anyone to give us a try, but even if you're not in market or maybe you don't even offer GMB, you'd like to learn more on localviking.com, man, we have a ton. We have like a free 240 page guide updated.
Nice.
The blog has a bunch of content. We have a little toolbox with a bunch of free little like a schema templates and little resources. I need to go and update that, but like really, we put out a cool weekly newsletter that is actually, I'm not gonna lie, model any newsletter we do. I try to model after like what the Hustle did. They're so good.
Yeah,
Like,
so good.
did you see freaking HubSpot bought the trends?
Yes,
It's crazy.
very
Sorry. Anyway,
interesting.
sorry. I'm just like, man, I'm a chatty Cathy, but no, I love that. So it's the newsletter's modeled kind of like that. I'm not saying we're as good by any means, but we do have a good writer there, and we have fun with it. Sometimes he has too much fun with it. But
I
like
love it.
just we try to put out a lot of content where our YouTube channel has a lot now. Like even like I mean, of course we love our customers. If you'd ever want to be a customer, we'd love to have you. But you can also just come and mooch the free content, and we're completely cool with it. We'd love to
Nice.
have you checking it out. So no hard sell. Just come check out what we're doing, and if you can use any of it to make some money in your businesses or make money for your clients or get some new ideas, then shoot, we made the world a little bit better of a place for you, and that's all that counts at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, thanks again for coming on, Mark. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. Thanks
Thanks,
everybody
man.
for watching. We'll see you in the next one.